it's possible that I'm going down the same road that I've been down before with a previous podcast that I released a couple of years ago, which split my audience in half. One half saying that they hated me for saying the things that I was saying, and the other half saying thank you for saying the things that they've been thinking for a long time but never actually said out loud. That particular podcast was titled Sexual Abuse Can Feel Nice, and as soon as I released it, it started going off on my social media. Even some of my friends messaged me immediately saying that the title was wrong and that I should have worded it differently. And but you know, I still kind of stand by that podcast because it's actually true. But yeah, maybe the wording could be different, and maybe I did it correctly. But that aside, I feel like today, as I record this, this idea that I've had in my mind for some time, heavily influenced by the events that I've been putting on recently, the ticketed events that have been going really well. I'd love to sit down and speak with you about the evolution of those events, and maybe I can do that another time. Maybe I could record a separate podcast for that, possibly. One of the aims of that those ticketed events are really to break down the misconceptions and stereotypes. And I had this idea in my head about putting together this particular podcast and sitting in front of this camera and talking about this. And the title that I currently think would suit this recording is "It Would Be Easy to Groom a Child." And I feel like that title is going to invoke the same emotions as the Sexual Abuse Can Feel Nice title. But I believe both of those titles are actually true. I believe they're factually true. If you want to know more about the other podcasts I keep referring to, it wasn't actually in audio format. At that time, I wasn't releasing these out in audio format, so you won't be able to search it if you're on a podcast app, but on YouTube it's available there if you just search my name and that title. But what we're doing today, I believe actually this is a very important discussion. Again, the title, "It Would Be Easy to Groom a Child." And the reason why I have been umming and ahhing about whether to record this or not, thinking, shall I do it, shall I not? What's the reaction going to be like? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should reword it. But I've gone with it, right? And I say I've gone with it at the time of this recording. I've gone with it. Let's see when you are actually seeing this podcast whether I actually went with that title. But it's true. Like, the title's true. And that's why I want to say it. And that's why when I put on these ticketed events, which is now mostly parents coming to those, which is great. It seems to have found its audience. When I go into schools, speak to teachers, when I go into local councils and speak to social workers, these are all people that either have children themselves or work with young people, work with children, and they've been through safeguarding training. And when I'm referring to like the teachers and the social workers, etc., they've been through their safeguarding training every year. But when I throw out a statement like "it would be easy to groom a child," it still shocks them. And I don't know why it shocks them, because it's so true. And I think if we can face that reality, accept that reality, admit to ourselves that that's a reality, then we are going to make massive leaps forward in problem solving this crime of exploitation of children in sexual ways, and work out, we're just going to advance the prevention methods so much quicker if we can just accept the vulnerability of children. And they're great words. Children are vulnerable. So let's start getting into this a little bit deeper. I want to talk with you about this. And the way I'm planning to talk to you about this is in age groups. This is the way that I was thinking this week would be the best way to address this title. And let's start with the youngest age groups. So let's start with 0 to 5 years old. Now, I know we are all thinking, what do you mean zero? Who's going to sexually abuse a baby, an infant? Well, it is true that happens. And I've just had an idea come to my mind because I have shared in previous times Blake Lively's speech at a event that she was at, and I'm wondering whether I should play that right now to explain about infants being sexually abused, and my decision is yes. Give me a second. I'm going to find that video and we'll play it, and then we'll talk about it after.
I didn't really know what child pornography was. You know, we all sort of have an idea of it, and I was afraid to ask as a mother. I asked him how young are the young kids he's seeing, and he told me infants. And I have a 6-month-old baby. So I said, what does that mean? You know, like what does an infant mean? And he said, with the umbilical cord still attached. You may know this person. It may be a doctor. It may be a coach. You know, I thought that people that were working with children were people that wanted to protect them. There was a nurse who was working with children with mental and physical disabilities, and when he was caught, they asked him how many children he abused, and he looked outside the window at the snow and said, how many snowflakes are there outside? So this is so prevalent, and I want you guys to know this, and I want it to resonate with you, and I want you to see that the Child Rescue Coalition in just 3 years has found 9,000 predators so far. They have saved 2,000 children.
Okay, there is a longer version of that speech, and you can go and search it if you type in Blake Lively Child Coalition Rescue. You can also find Child Coalition Rescue on Instagram. They're doing great work. I've done some collaborations with them in the past, but this is incredible to see a celebrity of high status talk about this. Also, just for quick reference, we don't call it child pornography because that indicates that pornography is the filming of consenting adults, and obviously children can't consent to be in sexual situations. We've been through that on many of my posts, so we all understand that now. But she is highlighting the magnitude of infants being something that people go for and are aroused by, and we know that on the dark web there are millions of videos and images of children of all ages. I don't want to go down too much of a tangent on this because I want to bring it back to our title, and the title of it would be easy to groom a child. Well, let's just take those ages. Let's take the infants because we're dealing with the age group 0 to 5. Before they're verbal, you don't even need to groom them. You just do whatever you want to them and they won't say anything because they can't talk. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable, then I'm sorry, but she's highlighting if you go and watch her longer speech, she actually brings up some data about the images and videos that are being shared online on a daily basis. And you'll see that this is happening for that age group. So grooming a child would be easy. Grooming a 0 to 2-year-old before they're verbal would be absolutely possible at any time, at any place that you wanted to, as long as you were alone with the child. So what can a parent do about this? Not leave your child with anyone is the only answer, but it's unrealistic. Okay, so we're all you pose a risk whenever you take your child to a nursery or give them to someone else. I mean, that's just facts. But you know, I'm not saying that anyone that gives their child under 2 to anyone else is that's a neglect thing. That's not what I'm saying at all. I hope you get my point. Now, let's continue moving on. So we go up to the 5-year-old bracket. And, you know, when you think about, let's just take a 4-year-old as an example. They are looking for attention. They're so innocent. I mean, when you're playing football with a 4-year-old, if you want to take that as an example, like all you've got to do to big them up is amazing. That's an amazing kick. Well done. You're brilliant at this. And then you watch how they behave. This is how they behave naturally anyway, isn't it? Because anyone that's ever interacted with a 4-year-old will know this, or been in the room with a 4-year-old. They need your approval. They need your attention. Look at me, watch me. And they're looking for that praise. And so to groom a child under 5, between what's the age bracket kind of we're dealing with now? when they become verbal to 5. I mean, you just got to give them praise. And then you've got them wrapped around your little finger because they're children and you're an adult, and that's the way nature has set it up. Not to be groomed, but that's the connection that they have with adults. You show them any attention and they will do anything for you. And let's continue on this thought process. And then if you've got a 5-year-old there who has more cognitive ability, I don't know if I've said that word correctly. If you were an adult who got aroused by doing immoral things with an innocent child, and one thing that would arouse you would be to touch their genitals. Let's say that was a situation, and please don't turn off this, right? If this is making you feel too uncomfortable, don't turn off, right? We are addressing these situations in their reality, because the children and teenagers are relying on us to do that. We're the adults, right? So we're we need to be strong-minded with this crime that's going on. So you have an adult, he gets aroused. I used the pronoun because that's who is committing most of these crimes. Excuse me. And they get aroused by touching the genitals, and they just say to that 5-year-old, this is like a little game that we play, and you don't tell anybody. And it just becomes so easy. A child of that age is so easily manipulated and moulded. So, of course, what we want is not rectification, but we want to know what we can do to eliminate this crime from happening to 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds who are verbal, who can understand some language, who can understand some rules of the household or wherever they're living, or the family that they live in. We want to know that. And I want to say to you that there are incredible practices out there to teach children about private areas, to teach children about labelling their body parts and understanding the rules around them. People have done incredible work on this. The NSPCC have got loads of resource. Lucy Faithfull Foundation have got loads of resource. Which other ones would I like to quote here? Loads. Anyone that's got resource, put your links in the comments section. They've done great work. Go to those websites. If you're a parent and you want to know how to teach your children about these different things, go to those websites. But I am going to say something which is going to make us all feel hopeless. There is no fail-safe way of protecting children at that age, right? Because you can teach them everything. You're never going to make it 100% sure protective. The only way you can make it 100% sure is if you follow your child around everywhere they go. And it's just not realistic. But what we're aiming for with all of this is we're aiming to maximize the chances that this crime doesn't happen to them. And how do we maximize the chances that this crime doesn't happen to them? We do that by giving them the tools and the knowledge to understand if something wrong is happening with them, to them, or they're being asked to do to someone else. That's very important. And that they come and tell us before that thing goes too far. The irony of it is that if a child comes and tells us that someone's touching them in the private area, the abuse has already happened. But anyway, we do what we can with what we've got here. I come across a really, really good video for which I think will help us parents who are like, but I just don't want to have that kind of conversation about labelling body parts and teaching private areas. My son or my daughter, they're 5 years old. I don't want to introduce them to this evil in the world, and I feel like it will ruin their innocence in some way. Now, for those that have been engaging in my content for some years, you will know that I have a comparison that shuts down the ruining of the fear of ruining a child's innocence, and that is the stranger danger conversation that we're all happy to have with children. We know we need to have that with children, and essentially that conversation is saying to the child, don't talk to anyone that mummy or daddy doesn't know while we're out, because they may take you away from us. You think that messaging to a 4 or 5-year-old would be truly terrifying, and it will ruin their innocence. It will let them know that not all adults are safe and someone may take you away from us. Like, that's the height of ruining their innocence. But it's okay because we know it's necessary to protect them. So this conversation around private areas, etc., I don't think is of that level. It's just labelling the body parts, etc. But I know we still feel a resistance to it. But somebody sent me a brilliant, in fact, yeah, it's Jennifer. Jennifer sent me a brilliant video. And the reason why I'm naming her is because she's an incredible woman who was groomed when she was 12 years old by a 19-year-old, and that 19-year-old exploited her horrifically. And she shared her story on our Something to Say YouTube channel. Go check that out and support that. If you type in Something to Say official on YouTube and you filter by channels, you're going to find that there. Go support her. Go support that work that we're doing over at Something to Say. Here's the video that she sent me, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. 1 second.
What are your private parts, Bubs?
Vulva.
Your vulva.
Nipples.
Okay.
Bum.
Okay.
My mouth.
Yeah. And what do we have to do with those body parts? We have to?
Put them safe.
Yes, and protect them. Do we let anyone touch those body parts? No. Only our trusted and safe people. And if someone wants to give you a kiss or a hug or something like that, what do they have to do?
Ask.
Why should people ask if they give you a hug or a kiss?
It's consent.
And consent is important.
Yeah.
Yeah? We're saying about safe secrets and unsafe secrets. Do we keep secrets from Mummy and Daddy?
No.
Mm-mm.
Only for me.
What do you mean?
To get me a toy. That would be a safe secret.
Because you're going to find out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Surprises are safe secrets because the person finds out. If it's an unsafe secret, how would it usually make you feel? Uncomfortable. If an adult says, I've got something to tell you and you can't tell your Mummy and Daddy, are they a safe adult? Mm-mm. Mummy and Daddy are always going to listen and will always be here to talk, okay? What's my job?
Keep me safe.
Exactly. And to be there for you. When you go to nursery, don't forget that your voice matters. My voice what?
Matters.
Your voice has power. So that also means we need to be mindful of what words are coming out of our mouths too.
Okay, I feel like that video is really important. Thank you, Jennifer, if you ever do check out this podcast, for sending me that. And the reason why I think it's important, because I feel like it just settles the unease that we would feel as parents talking to our young children about that. It's calm, it's simple, it's valuable, the child understands it. And again, we wish we didn't have to do this, but we live in a world where we do need to do this. So we should do it. And it's maximizing that the chances that that child will say something if those rules that they've been taught are broken. So let's continue moving on with age groups, because I don't want to get stuck here. I want to continually progress this conversation going up the age groups. So we've covered 0 to 5. I'm sorry if you feel upset right now. I'm sorry if you feel hopeless right now. The reason why we're having these discussions is to find a way forward through those emotions. Okay, so stick with me. 5 to 10-year-olds. Now, a completely different situation. 5 to 10-year-olds are completely different, of course, to 0 to 5-year-olds. Let's take the world that 5 to 10-year-olds live in, and we do think about them as young people forming their own personalities more deeply, understanding what they like and what they don't like more deeply, but understanding the world a bit better, understanding rules a bit better, understanding what's allowed and what's not allowed a bit better. So we would like to think that grooming a 5 to 10-year-old into doing something sexual with you wouldn't be easy. But again, I stick with the title. It would still be easy to groom a child of that age. So I released a post recently on social media, which I thought was, I thought it was pretty good. When I thought of this concept, I thought it was undeniable, and it would just make every parent of a child of those ages think, because the child of those ages, they spend a lifetime online. Lots of their life is online. Depending on your parenting techniques, of course, depending on how much screen time they have, but we are going down a culture, whether you agree about it or not. That's not the debate here. The fact is that we are going down a culture where screens are becoming more and more used. Screens and tablets and phones, they are very sophisticated devices. They tap into our human condition, and that's why us adults can't get off them either. So children really don't stand any chance. That is completely mesmerizing and thrilling. So when a child is online, let's keep going down this road. We have to remember, and this is by no means me telling anyone what they should do with their children, because I'm not an expert and I'm not in a position to be doing that. I don't want to do that. This is not about judging what you decide to do with your children with regards to a screen. If they have screens all the time, if they don't have any screens, you do you, right? You do you. Make a judgment on what you think is best. But let's just go down a factual road of that. When a child is on a screen, the way I've always thought about it, and that is that essentially that child is in a world where you're not at. So you remember back in the day before screens, you used to go out on your bicycle, right? When you left the house and you got out of your road on your bicycle, your parents were no longer there. There's no parent to check the decisions that you're making when you're out on your bike with your mates or on your own. There's no parent to say, remember this or remember that. All of a sudden, as soon as you're out on your bike and you've left the street that you live on, you are on your own and there's no parental guidance. Now, what we are involved in is, as soon as a child is on their screen, they are outside of the road, essentially, if we're going to use that analogy. They're on their own with no parental guidance, because you're not seeing what's on the screen. You're not seeing if anyone's interacting with your child in that way. You're not seeing the adverts that are popping up. You're not seeing what's on the up next on the home feed of whatever app they're on. You're not seeing who they're communicating with in the live environment with the game they're playing. So yeah, that's just facts, right? We're just stating facts. Again, we're not judging what anyone does with screens and their children. That's not the point of this. What we're trying to do is we're trying to discuss the dangers so we can find better ways of minimizing the risk. So we continue on this. And I think about this a lot, obviously. I think about all of this all of the time. It drives me mad sometimes. But I was thinking, okay, this is really interesting because it's a real danger. Offenders that want to entice a child into doing something sexual, even if that's chatting with them in a sexual way, they can't believe their luck with the internet. Because back in the day, before the internet, they would actually have to get physical contact with a child and probably groom their family before they had access to the child. They'd maybe never get the child on their own, or very rarely get the child on their own. And now they've got access to thousands of children who they can pretend that they're someone else. They can message hundreds, thousands in one day, and see who bites the bait. And they probably thinking now that this is set up for them. Really, they are laughing at us with the lack of security and rules that we have around this, especially on social media platforms. I mean, the rules of the social media platform companies, that's what I'm saying. So a lot more vulnerable now. Children are a lot more vulnerable now at those ages. So the post that I put out there was, and check this out. So I said, what are the chances that your child would send a picture of themselves with no top on in exchange for £100 worth of gaming coins? Be honest. And I just thought that question would blow any parent's head off. Like, literally, you don't want to think about that question, because anyone that's being honest about the answer to that question would be like, the chances are pretty high. Like, you just think of a boy, a 9-year-old boy playing FIFA, and I don't know how FIFA runs these days. It's so much more complex to back in the day. But I know that if you've got vouchers or coins or money, you can buy players, for example. If you were to befriend a 9-year-old, not even befriend them, just send them a one-off message and say, look, I've got £100 worth of FIFA coins for you. You just need to send a picture of me with your top off and no one will ever find out, I promise you. Look, these are a list of names of all the other people that have done it and their feedback on receiving the £100. Like, you would get boys to do it. And then my post went on to say this. Once that exchange was successful and your child received the £100, what are the chances that they would send the next request, the next more explicit request, for another £100, because they've already seen that the transaction was successful and nobody ever found out about it, because you're not going to find out about this because you don't see the money. What are the chances that they'd send that next request? And I can't help but think the chances would be even higher that they'd send the next request because the first request worked out well. Now, I'm not saying every child would do this, right? I'm just trying to highlight the vulnerability of children and how easy it would be to entice them, groom them into something sexual. Definition of grooming, that's what just came into my head. I know we did this on the last podcast too, but let me just quickly pull up the definition of grooming so that we're all on the same page here. Okay, so grooming is when someone builds a relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or young person so they can manipulate, exploit, or abuse them. That's what we're talking about here. Another definition that I think is extremely useful, because I don't think anyone could confidently answer the question of what is sexual abuse, what's the definition of sexual abuse. That's such a complicated question. As I said, I don't think anyone could respond. Even the people that have been in, let's say, working in schools for 20 years could actually answer that. So let me pull up the definition of that. Okay, so here it is. Sexual abuse involves forcing or enticing a child to take part in sexual activities, whether or not the child is aware of what is happening. These are two definitions that I use in my talks now. So this sexual abuse definition is very, very important. Now I'm going to read it out again. Sexual abuse involves forcing or enticing a child to take part in sexual activities, whether or not the child is aware of what is happening. And that's when we bring in this online space, because you would possibly, before we explained all of this, think, well, how can sexual abuse happen with my child online? Well, enticing them into something sexual, whether they are aware of it, whether it's happening or not. The reason why we don't want that going on is because we don't know where those images are going. We don't know where this is going to lead. We don't know if it's going to lead to an actual meetup. We also understand that there will be trauma and some kind of like feelings of shame or regret or anger as that child grows up and realizes what they were manipulated into doing. So that is all going on. So we want to continue moving. I don't want this to turn into something that's crazy long. So we have now the age group we've covered, 0 to 5. We've now covered the age group 5 to 10. And I know that we could talk about those two age groups like so much more. For example, we kind of covered boys in that 5 to 10 age group. We could easily cover girls. And I would have so much to say on that. They are very different as young people at that age. And but, you know, as I mentioned, we need to continue moving. So let's start talking about the next age bracket, and let's go for 10 to 15-year-olds. So We know that things are going to start changing massively at this age group. We know that things are changing for them with regards to their body, with regards to their mind, with regards to how they feel about the world as they enter the puberty stage and the development starts happening. Now, I don't know if you remember what it used to be like when you were going through puberty or you made those changes, but I remember it really, really vividly. And everything changed. I was more conscious. I was interested in image. I was interested in what people thought of me. I was more assertive. I had testosterone flying. I was interested in excelling in sport, and like the world changed. I changed. So you would have thought that with a 11, 12, 13 years old. They're now in secondary school too, so even that's changed. They're being treated differently. They've been taught through the education system for some time about how what the rules are. They know them all now. It's ingrained in them. And then you would have thought that actually they would not be susceptible to grooming. But again, you know, we're going along with this trend. I think they are just as easy to groom as the other age brackets that we've covered today. Their just vulnerabilities are just completely different. Now, there are so many stories and analogies that I use in my events to explain these. For example, I have for the age group 0 to 10, just for the under 10s, I have an analogy of Father Christmas that I use. And for the teenagers, I've got an analogy of TikTok that I use, a TikTok story that I know of that really explains these really well. But I said to myself before I sat down and started recording this that I would not use those stories to explain my points, because I don't want to burn that material. I wanted to keep it for the events only. And I'm just resisting bringing them in because they're super powerful. And it's so funny, you know, because when I do those events, especially the Father Christmas story and the TikTok analogy, it's like you see people's minds start firing, and I know they're strong, but I'm not going to use them. I'm not going to use them here. Let's talk about girls in their teenage years. I saw a video once saying that teenage girls are the most vulnerable members of society that we have. And you know what? I'm going to find that video so I can play it. Just give me 1 second.
Are the most victimized element of our society. And there's a few reasons that's so. There was a survey of prison inmates a few years ago, and they had committed the majority of their crimes, 75%, against teenage girls. And we asked ourselves why. Why is that the case? And it's because teenage girls offer less resistance than adult women do. They pose less risk to a predator. They're perceived as sexual objects.
Okay, so you can see, I think it's explained very, very well. And it's, again, something that makes us feel hopeless, makes us feel angry, makes us feel like we don't know what we're going to do about this. And you think about, what is it, like how are we going to maximize the chances that they don't fall to this trickery or this manipulation from people who are out there trying to exploit them, who get aroused by them? And for me, for the teenagers, it's like, why aren't we just sitting down? And these aren't my words. Let me not take credit for this. This is Dr. Emily Setti, who I've had on this podcast before. In fact, I think she was one of the first episodes in the audio format. And I think she's amazing and brilliant. She's available on X if you want to search for her. I've done workshops for her at with university students before, and she communicates with them in a very, very unique way. And she really grabs their attention. She's excellent. And I want to continue supporting her work. By the way, just a quick tangent. As you can see, I record this podcast in the room where I live. And I one day want to be renting studios and bringing guests in to interview them and creating like great visuals and really marketing the podcast heavily. And a lot more than what I do now. I want to get up there with the Diary of the CEO kind of level. That's seriously one of my aims. And I will continue working towards them. We'll remember these times. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the room that I'm recording this in, and I've got like cheap equipment, and I have to stop the camera every 20 minutes because it runs out of timing and all of those things. And I hope to bring in people like Dr. Emily Setti to explain to us her career's work and the different techniques that she uses. So I'm going in that direction, so stick with me. So she said to me, and it always resonated with me, and I always use this, and she's like, why are we not just talking to teenagers on a level about the world? Not in its extremities, but when it comes to people out there that want to exploit them for sexual things, why don't we just tell them, like there is a danger out there, and if you're ever approached by somebody indecently, come and speak to us. You don't need to worry, because you're not going to be in trouble even if you feel like you've made some mistakes. We're here to help you. We're here to support you out of those situations. And if you're an adult speaking to a teenager about that type of thing, and you've made some mistakes in your past, I always think it would be so valuable for them, for you to be open about that, regardless of like, if it was online you made a mistake, in person you made a mistake. Because I think when they hear your vulnerability, and they hear that actually you're a human being too, and you were a teenager once too, that if they ever come across, or they ever get themselves in a terrible situation, I just think it's going to like maximize the chances that they're going to come to you and not try to deal with it themselves. There's a great video on, and I'm going to plug it again, the Something to Say official YouTube channel. It's from Annie. Let me just pull up the title of that. 1 second. So the title of that video is "My Abusers Took Photos and Used Them to Shame Me into Silence." And you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube here, I'm highlighting the video that I just encourage you to go and watch on the Something to Say YouTube channel. And she's talking about how she was enticed by 3 boys, given alcohol, ended up in a place where she shouldn't have been, and they abused her, took photos, and then used them as blackmail. So she had to keep going and meeting them for sex, otherwise they'd post the pictures online. It is a story that's absolutely harrowing, and we feel for Annie, but it is like one of the most valuable stories I've ever heard, and I wish that it was shown to every teenage girl, and to workshop it, so the school would show it and they'd workshop it, because the teenagers would learn so much from that. I'm not excluding the boys here, we're just going for like the majority audience that would gain from that. And so I believe just these true stories to these teenagers, because they're a bit older and they want to be given that respect, they want to be talked to on that level, that I think that would just be so valuable for them. And then we can continue maximizing the chances that they won't get in a problem and not come to us, because Annie didn't go to anyone. Right? When those boys were threatening her with those pictures, she didn't actually go to anyone about it because she was scared. She didn't know who would help her, or if anyone would help her. Now, something that I've just realised I missed doing in this recording was when we were talking about the age group 5 to 10, we didn't talk about what possible methods you could use to speak to that age group, about maximizing the chances that they don't fall into a terrible situation that we don't want them to. And you know what, it's kind of along the lines of these teenagers, but my goodness, I'm putting so many people's plugs in this podcast, aren't I? But I interviewed on this podcast Richard Pomfret, and I'm just going to pull up, just for people that are interested in doing further listening or further watching, I'm just going to pull up the title of that particular podcast. 1 second. So it's available on my YouTube channel. On the left here, you can see it's called Children Are Vulnerable Online. What are we going to do about this? And this is Richard Pomfret. By the way, I feel like I'm speaking at 1,000,000 miles per hour. You know what happened recently? One of my mates was listening to this podcast, and he's like, "Why do you talk so weird on your podcast?" And I'm like, "What do you mean talk so weird?" He's like, "That is not how you sound usually." So I'm actually on a bit of a mission to try my best to talk normally into this camera, but it's actually just really weird and unusual because I'm in this room, as you can see, and this camera is here. And when you're watching this or listening to this, it feels like I'm talking to you, right? Because that's how we receive the content. But I'm just talking to this camera and I'm alone in this room. So no wonder my speech is not as it would be if I was in the pub with a mate, grabbing a drink and chatting. But yeah, I was like, oh, mate, this is a bit cringe for me. Do you know what I mean? I just wish I was talking normally. But yes, I feel like I'm talking a million miles per hour. Just breathe, Jeremy, just breathe. Okay. So, Richard Pomfret, he speaks in primary schools, secondary schools, to young people about online safety. I have messaged him because we're in communication. This podcast that we released is very informative. Go check that out. And I've asked him if I can go and actually sit in on some of his workshops, because I'd love to see his techniques and what he's doing. I can learn a lot from him. And he is in schools literally like every day. He's posting on LinkedIn a lot. So go check him out if you would like to do that. But something that he taught me, which I just found was so fascinating. He said that one of his biggest advice pieces to parents is with this 5 to 10 age group, who are a lot of them are involved in gaming, very easily accessible when they're online in that way, very easily groomed when they're online in that way. And he said that what he started doing was speaking with the kids about what would stop them from coming forward if, for example, they were on Xbox Live, right? And let's use FIFA as the example again. They're playing FIFA. They've been on there consecutively for a couple of nights. They've been speaking to someone through Messenger on there, or even in the live chat that they've got in their headset. And after a little while, that person who they're chatting to says, you fancy just like exchanging WhatsApps so we can just chat there? It's so much easier than this Xbox Live. I wanted to show you something this morning that I thought was so cool with this new thing they've released on FIFA, but I couldn't contact you, and I was worried I wasn't going to speak to you in the evening. So, but that thing's gone now, and I can't show it to you anymore. So, how about you give me your WhatsApp, and then next time that thing comes along, I'll send it to you. And whilst this 12-year-old boy is playing FIFA, he's like, yeah, whatever, mate. It's 07 blah 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 blah, and now that person's got this boy's number. And it spirals out of control from there with blackmail or sending explicit stuff to his WhatsApp and saying, now you've got it on your phone. That's illegal, by the way. Send me XYZ. Otherwise, I'm going to report you to the police. Whatever the situation be. You can see how very easily these situations can occur, right? So Richard said to me, the biggest piece of advice that he would give to parents is just to let that child know, if they ever get caught up in a situation, that they will not be in trouble if they come forward. They will not be in trouble, because we're here to help you, right? We're here to help you. We don't want you getting in a horrible situation, you trying to deal with it yourself. And the reason why he said that is a very important piece of information, which maybe you wouldn't have thought of initially, is because children of that age, they don't want to tell you about the dangerous situation that they've got themselves in, because they made a mistake and they broke one of the rules that they've been taught in schools and possibly even being discussed in home by handing out their WhatsApp number in this particular example that we're using. So they don't want to come to you about that because they've made a mistake. And what they're also mostly fearful of is you're going to panic when you hear about the situation, that you're going to remove the Xbox from them. They're going to say, no way, you're going to hit the red button, all the alarm bells are going to start going off, and you're just going to say, no more Xbox. Now, included in that is mobile phones. Children of that age don't want to come forward and talk to you about the mobile phone situation that they've got in, because they don't want their mobile phone taken away. And I remember Richard talking about a survey that he did with these young kids. And what he said to them, which is this is laughable, but it's so serious. He said to those young kids, what would you rather? Would you rather break your arm or have your mobile phone taken away? And can you guess for a moment what the overwhelming vote or majority is every single time? Do you think anyone puts their hand up for lose their mobile phone? No. All of those kids are all about breaking their arm rather than losing their mobile phone. So that really highlights to us the resistance that they would have to come forward with the fear that their parent will take their device away from them. So lots and lots for us to think about. So we've been through various age groups. We went through 0 to 5. We've been through 5 to 10. We've been through 10 to 15. And so on and so on. And I realise I've been talking for 45-ish minutes. And I thought this would be 20 minutes. But I feel like also these podcasts are just growing in length. I hope they're okay for you. I hope that they're not getting boring as I speak longer. Because I've just got so much... You know what? I've got so many thoughts in my head. And I've got so many things that I want to say and so much information that I've gathered over the years. But just to put a summary on the end of this podcast, just to finalize this podcast and really bring it to a close, I just want people to realize that the people that are going after these children, they're not these brain boxes, like heavily calculated people who have got the best techniques, and they're strategists. They're like calculated people of society. They're just everyone. You don't need to be a brain box to groom a child. That's the kind of thing that I'm getting. I just want it to become so real that this should be our highest concern, to support young people through their childhood and adolescence, to ensure that we keep them as safe as we can. There's always going to be young people fall through the cracks. We're not going to be able to save everyone, but damn right we want to make sure that we did everything in our possible power to ensure that this doesn't happen, especially with the online space these days. It doesn't take that much. As you saw, as we talked about, it doesn't take that much to groom a child. And that's why I feel very strongly towards the title, which I really truly believe I'm going to stick with, of it would be easy to groom a child. So I'm going to put this podcast out. I'm going to spend some time editing it today. We're going to see how people feel about it. I hope it gets a positive response. I hope people aren't triggered. I hope people don't have an emotive response to the title and just come at me on social media without even coming and checking out what this is about. If you think this has been valuable, if you think you have friends or people in your social circles that never really think about this in this kind of detail, please send this to them. Share it on your social media platforms, and we can really get some momentum on this and try to do a good thing for the younger generations who are living in a world that we created, and they're vulnerable by nature, but we want to make them strong and empowered, and we want to work with them as a team to get them through their childhood and adolescence, not falling into these horrific situations. I hope that was okay for you. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. See you again for another one soon. Thank you.